The story begins on a certain evening. A woman was working overtime in a warehouse. After finishing her work, she packed up her things and prepared to close up. However, just as she was about to turn off the lights, she suddenly noticed a dark figure standing right by the door. Startled, she quickly turned the lights back on, but the shadow had vanished. Yet, when she switched the lights off again, it reappeared. Panicked, the woman hurriedly left the warehouse and went straight to the director's office to tell him about the strange incident. However, the director was too busy talking on the phone to pay attention to her words. After she left, he decided to go check the warehouse himself. As soon as he stepped inside, the mysterious shadow appeared behind him. Before he could react, it had already moved dangerously close. Terrified, he turned to run but unfortunately tripped and fell. A sharp pain shot through his foot. Looking down, he was horrified to see that something had bitten into it, leaving deep wounds with blood oozing out. Before he could fully grasp what was happening, the shadow appeared right in front of him. It had the shape of a woman, yet it remained within the darkness, unable to step into the light. Realizing that this thing was afraid of light, the director ran back to his office and turned on all the lights. He grabbed a metal rod, ready to defend himself. But just as luck would have it, the entire office suddenly lost power. The door creaked open slowly. Before the director could understand what was happening, something yanked him into the darkness. A loud crash echoed through the room. When the lights flickered back on, his lifeless body lay there, motionless. That unfortunate man was Paul, a husband and a father of two. After his mysterious death, strange occurrences began to plague his family. That very night, Paul's young son, Martin, was sleeping when a strange noise in the hallway woke him up. Groggy but curious, he got up to check and saw his mother mumbling to someone in the darkness. But as he got closer, he realized she was talking to nothing but empty space. Sensing Martin's concern, his mother reassured him, saying she was just rehearsing something. She urged him to go back to bed. As Martin turned to leave, he glanced back, only to be struck with terror. A dark shadow loomed right behind his mother. Panicked, he sprinted back to his room and locked the door. He spent the entire night wide awake, eyes fixed on the door, afraid to sleep. The next day at school, Martin called his older sister, asking her to pick him up. His sister, Rebecca, had been living with her boyfriend for a while, having distanced herself from the family due to conflicts. When she arrived, Martin told her everything that had happened the night before and begged not to return home. He wanted to stay with her for a few days. Thinking her little brother was just upset with their mother, Rebecca decided to drive him home to get his things. Standing at the doorstep, Martin nervously told her his mother had been acting very strangely lately. Every night, their mother would talk to someone in her room. Suddenly, she opened the door and stepped out. Seeing Rebecca, she was overjoyed, as it had been a long time since her daughter last came home. However, Rebecca remained cold and simply stated that she was there to take Martin to stay at her place for a few days. The boy then went upstairs to pack his clothes. As he passed by his mother's room, he paused and peeked inside. Out of nowhere, a dark shadow appeared, pressing against the door, causing Martin to panic and run away. Rebecca quickly took her brother and left the house, ignoring their mother's desperate attempts to stop them. Their mother pleaded, saying she was terrified of staying home alone, but Rebecca didn't care. Upon arriving at her apartment, she gave Martin his own room and assured him he could stay as long as he wanted. That night, she even cooked for him herself. Everything seemed normal, at least for a while. But later that night, as Rebecca was sleeping, she was startled awake by a strange noise. Opening her eyes, she saw someone sitting right outside her bedroom door. Thinking it was Martin, she looked closer, only to realize it was a woman. Just as she reached out to turn on the light, the dark figure vanished. However, when the light went out again, it reappeared. Thinking it was just a nightmare, Rebecca tried to brush it off. The next morning, she walked over to the spot where the shadow had appeared the night before. To her shock, she discovered a name scratched into the floor, Diana. Seeing that name sent a shiver down her spine, triggering memories from decades ago. Back when Rebecca was just a little girl, one night, as she was drawing in her room, she suddenly heard noises coming from her closet. She approached it and turned on the light. Unexpectedly, one of her drawings fell right in front of her. Looking at it, she was horrified to see that someone had added a dark shadow standing next to her mother, with the name Diana written beside it. Meanwhile, the figure of her father had been eerily blacked out. That memory had haunted her ever since. Unable to keep it to herself any longer, she decided to tell her boyfriend about everything. Rebecca suspected that her mother knew something about this woman named Diana, so she and Brett drove back to her childhood home to get some answers. However, when they arrived, their mother was nowhere to be found. Rebecca entered her mother's room, searching through her belongings. She found old photographs of her mother when she was young. In every picture, there was always a mysterious woman standing beside her, her face obscured. Digging deeper into a pile of hidden documents, Rebecca finally uncovered the truth about Diana. Diana had once suffered from a rare condition that made her skin extremely sensitive to light. Exposure to bright light would cause her skin to develop severe sores and blisters. Because of this, her family sent her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. However, the doctors there used her for experiments, forcing her to take various medications. Later, they even exposed her to high-intensity light to observe her reaction. Unable to withstand the torture, Diana eventually died. Diana's body was completely burned beyond recognition. While Rebecca was away, their mother went to her apartment alone to see Martin. The two spent the day shopping together, and that night, they sat and watched TV. Martin thought that his mother had finally returned to normal. However, before he could feel relieved, she suddenly went around turning off all the lights. Then, she whispered to him that she wanted him to meet a friend of hers. At that moment, from behind Martin, a dark presence emerged. Terrified, he screamed and turned around, only to see the shadow sitting right in front of him. Panicking, Martin yanked his hand away from his mother and ran to turn on the lights, causing the shadow to disappear instantly. Later that night, when Rebecca got home, Martin told her everything. Rebecca began to suspect that Diana's ghost and their mother were somehow connected to a past event. While she was deep in thought, a sudden noise echoed from the hallway. Thinking it was her boyfriend, Rebecca opened the door, but there was no one there. Suddenly, a hand shot out from under the bed, grabbed Martin's ankle, and tried to drag him away. Rebecca, startled, rushed over and managed to pull him back just in time. Fortunately, both of them were safe. They realized that no matter where they went, Diana's ghost would always follow. With no other choice, Rebecca and her boyfriend decided to drive Martin back to their mother's house to confront her and get some answers. That was when the truth began to unfold. When their mother was young, she suffered from severe depression, which led to her being admitted to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. That was where she met Diana. The two quickly became close friends, supporting each other through their struggles. After Diana was killed, her soul, filled with hatred, could not move on. Instead, it lingered and hid within their mother's house. Over time, their spirits became intertwined as one. Diana did not want anyone interfering in their bond, so she killed their mother's previous two husbands. Now, she had set her sights on her two children. Rebecca tried to explain to her mother that Diana was dangerous and that she was the one who had murdered their father. However, their mother refused to believe it. She insisted that Diana was still alive and would never harm their family. At that moment, Rebecca realized that her mother had never truly escaped her depression. The loneliness had consumed her, making her delude herself into believing that Diana was still with her. Rebecca felt guilty for leaving home all those years ago, allowing her mother to reach this state. She decided to stay this time and find a way to drive Diana's spirit out of her mother. That night, before going to sleep, Rebecca taped over all the light switches in the house, fearing that Diana would appear again. Martin also prepared flashlights and candles, just in case. However, late that night, Rebecca was jolted awake by an eerie silence. She quickly realized that the entire town had lost power. Grabbing a flashlight, she rushed down to the basement to check the circuit breaker. Meanwhile, Martin woke up and, not seeing his sister, grew anxious. He lit a candle and wandered around the house searching for her. Suddenly, Diana's ghost appeared right behind him. Martin tried to run, but he couldn't avoid the patches of darkness in the house. The shadowy figure dragged him down the hallway. Thinking fast, Martin held the candle up in front of him, forcing the ghost to recoil in fear. Seizing the opportunity, he sprinted toward the basement. At that moment, Rebecca was desperately trying to switch the circuit breaker back on, but nothing happened. Suddenly, Diana appeared and slammed the basement door shut, trapping the two siblings inside. Upstairs, their mother, realizing what was happening, shouted at Diana, demanding that she not harm her children. She tried to take a sedative to suppress the spirit, but Diana violently threw her against the wall. Meanwhile, in the basement, Rebecca's boyfriend, Brett, heard the screams and rushed to help. However, Diana's ghost appeared again. Terrified, he used his phone's flashlight to scan the area, but the ghost swiftly knocked the phone out of his hands and crushed it right before his eyes. Panicked, Brett made a run for the door, but as soon as he reached a dark area, Diana emerged and grabbed him. Fortunately, he managed to turn on a nearby car's headlights just in time, causing the ghost to vanish. Overwhelmed with fear, Brett jumped into the car and sped away without looking back. Now, only Rebecca and Martin were left trapped in the basement. To keep the ghost from getting close, they continuously fed the furnace to maintain the light. Martin eventually found a glow stick, and Rebecca took it to inspect their surroundings. As she explored, she was horrified to see countless handprints covering the walls, along with cryptic messages left behind by Diana. It became clear that the spirit had been hiding down here for a long time. At the far end of the basement, Rebecca discovered several mannequins. Their faces had been grotesquely deformed, making them look terrifying. Suddenly, Diana appeared right beside her and lunged at her with deadly intent. This time, the spirit had fully revealed her true form. Rebecca desperately shone the glow stick at her, but it had no effect. In a moment of crisis, Martin grabbed a flashlight and aimed it directly at Diana, causing her body to burn and disappear. Meanwhile, outside, Brett had called the police for help. The officers arrived and broke open the basement door, rescuing Rebecca and Martin. Rebecca tried to warn them about the danger inside the house, but one of the officers insisted on going in to investigate. Without warning, Diana appeared again. The officer fired multiple shots at her, but they had no effect. Within seconds, the ghost lunged at him, killing him instantly. Hearing his screams, the female officer ran to help, but before Rebecca could stop her, she too met the same fate. Worried about her mother, Rebecca asked Brett to look after Martin while she went upstairs to find her. As she climbed the stairs, Diana suddenly appeared from behind and shoved her down. Before she could get up, the ghost was already next to her and flung her against the wall. Just as Rebecca was about to meet her end, their mother appeared, holding a gun in her hands. She shouted, "Don't you ever lay a hand on my children." Then, without hesitation, she turned the gun on herself and pulled the trigger. Since her soul had long been intertwined with Diana's, her death meant the ghost would vanish as well. Out of love for her children, she made the ultimate sacrifice, giving up everything she had to save them. Rebecca ran to her mother, crying out her name, but it was too late. In that moment, she finally realized just how deep her mother's love had been all along. A tragic ending for both of them. And with that, the movie comes to an end. What are your thoughts after watching? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss out on upcoming movies. Thank you and goodbye.